we will we'll have to take closer looks of those farms as we go forward. Then in 1937, Montgomery County built what most people remember as the Swinging Bridge. It was built at the exact same location as the first one. Beautiful bridge. We're looking west, we're looking toward Hill Road in this image. Now, in this image, we're looking toward Red Hill, we're looking toward Knight Road. Again, there is the Swinging Bridge, the one built in 1937. And approaching from Knight Road, as you approach the Swinging Bridge, there were two farms on either side of Swinging Bridge Road. The one on our left was the James and Catherine Klein farm. The one on the right was the Howard and Cora DeLong farm. Now there's a cute story that goes with these farms. You've heard the expression, the boy married the girl down the street. Well, the Kleins had a son named Clayton, and the DeLongs had a daughter named Jenny. Clayton married Jenny. So here's a story of the boy married the girl across the street, not down the street. Okay, and here is a close-up of those two farms and the Red Hill side, or the Knight Road end of the Swinging Bridge. When my son enlarged this for me, I sort of had a chuckle because I thought, my gosh, these people walking down Swinging Bridge Road, right there they are. Okay, another image of the Swinging Bridge. I suspect these were taken shortly after the Swinging Bridge was built in 1937. I'm not a car person, so I can't date the cars. And here is the first Red Hill Boy Scout cabin. It was located on the west side of the Swinging Bridge, the Hill Road side, and slightly upstream from the Swinging Bridge. Does somebody remember? You, David, you did? Yes. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Yes.
It was still standing when the reservoir was built, but it hadn't been used in years and had fallen into disrepair, and then it was raised. And this is another image of early stage preparation, early stage construction of the reservoir. This is the Swinging Bridge area. We can see here concrete anchors for the Swinging Bridge on the west side. The Red Hill Boy Scout cabin would have been located right up here on this bluff. And of course, the Perkioga Creek is flowing through the valley here. All right, now we're going to come out to the intersection, the Knight Road intersection of Swinging Bridge Road and Knight Road. And this would be the northwest corner. And on that corner was the John and Victoria Sowich farm. That's the house, yep. The Sowiches were from Philadelphia, and they purchased this farm at a sheriff's sale in 1931. By most standards, this was a very small property, a very small farm. It was like 9 acres in size. Most of them averaged between 60 and 80 acres. There's another image of the Sowich farm. The Knight Road entrance to Swinging Bridge Road will be just beyond the farmhouse, and we'll see a better image of that.
I just talked to Frances, one of the daughters.
Fran, and she's in Florida.
She's in Florida.
Yeah. Another image of the Sowich farm. As I mentioned, here is the entrance, the Knight Road entrance to Swinging Bridge Road. And as I said earlier, it's still plainly visible. There's now a cable that goes across the entrance to prevent vehicles from entering. But it's clearly be seen. All right, we're looking east on Knight Road in the direction of Route 29. Sowich farm. John Sowich had established a very successful poultry business. And those are the poultry pens out behind the barn and the farmhouse. And as you can see, the reservoir is beginning to fill up. So this was probably taken somewhere in 1958. Now, there is the entrance to Swinging Bridge Road from Knight Road, and this was a common practice. I have been told that when these buildings were raised, whatever was salvageable was and was repurposed, if it could be. And what was not salvageable and could be repurposed and combustible, it was simply burned. So those are the poultry pens smoldering there in the center of the image. All right, now right across the street from the John and Victoria Sowich farm was the Jacob Nisney farm. It's the only farm I don't have an image of. But again, my son came to the rescue and said, "Hey, Dad, let's do this. Let's go to one of the pen pilot images." This is a 1942 image, and we'll enlarge the area of that aerial image to show the Nisney farm. So we can see it here in relationship to the Sowich farm, which we just saw. Other points of reference are Knight Road, Red Hill Road, Stevens Farm, the Molaski Farm, which we will see, and Markley Road, Swinging Bridge Road. So again, I'm repeating myself, there was the Jacob Nisney farm. Traveling up the road, we come to the intersection of Markley Road and Knight Road. And on the west side of that intersection was the Anastasia and Josephine Molaski farm. This farm was my wife's grandparents' farm. They purchased this farm in 1920. They actually owned two farms, and we will see the second one shortly. This was the second purchase they made. Now, if you travel on Knight Road today and you pass the Aqua maintenance buildings, are you familiar with that? One of the buildings on the Molaski farm is still standing. It's this one right here, and it's plainly visible as you go flying by. Everything else is gone. There's another view of the Molaski farm. The entrance to Market Road is right here. We're looking in the direction of Perkiomen Heights. We're looking northwest on Knight Road in the center. And another image of the Molaski farm. Now, the previous two and this one are courtesy of Donald Mull. Remember the furniture shop? Donald was an avid photographer, and these images are courtesy of him. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but right here, there are clothes hanging on the washing line. It reassured me to know that there were no homeowners associations on Knight Road in those days.
So may I ask a question?
Certainly.
The home that we're looking at on
Yep.
the top of the knoll, that's Molaski's son built that home.
That was Ed Molaski built that home in anticipation of the farmhouse being raised. Ed and Mary Molaski, along with Gail, lived on the farm until 1955.
He did.
Yep, and then Ed built, Ed and
So
Mary.
that means the Molaski farm owned land on either side.
On
of
both
Knight
sides,
Road.
correct.
Okay.
Yep, there's 12 acres, as I recall, on Ed Molaski's side. Okay. As I said, a lot of things were burned, anything that was combustible, and there's the Molaski farmhouse. So, after everything that could be burned was, then of course the stone walls mentioned that the Molaskis owned two properties, two farms. The one we just saw was approximately 60 acres in size. This was the first one they purchased, actually. This one, Anastasi Molaski purchased, along with his brother-in-law, Brunislaw Piotrowski. And they purchased this in 1918. In 1919, Brunislaw Piotrowski sold his share of the farm to Anastasi, and the Molaskis owned it outright. Now, originally, this was the Daniel Borneman homestead. Daniel Borneman came to America in 1721, and he began clearing the land and building a small log cabin for himself in 1725, which I believe makes this one of the oldest farmsteads in Upper Hanover Township. Now, if you have an opportunity, pause as you're leaving after the presentation. Julie Longacre has a beautiful painting hanging on the wall out here of the Daniel Borneman homestead. This photo is the only known photo to exist of this farm, and it was inspiration for Julie Longacre to do the painting. See if I can pinpoint it. Right here is the log cabin. Julie does a better depiction of it on her painting. Another image of the, I'll say the 1918 Molaski farm, or the Daniel Borneman homestead. The barn is now gone. Again, this was probably taken about 1956, 57 before the home was torn down. Okay, I mentioned Schwenk's one-room schoolhouse earlier. Now, as you're traveling on Knight Road today, before you start to drive on the raised road bed, or prior to the larger of the two bridges, on the left side of Knight Road, there's a small county parking area, if you're familiar with that. That was the site of Schwenk's one-room schoolhouse. It was one of 12 one-room schoolhouses that once stood in Upper Hanover Township. In 1948, the township sold several of these to private individuals. And a doctor who was doing research at the University of Pennsylvania in 1948, his name was Frederick Heinrich Louis, purchased this farmhouse and converted it into a summer residence. Now, Frederick Heinrich Louis was an important figure. The research he was doing at the University of Pennsylvania was early research into Parkinson's disease. And today there are bodies that can be detected in Parkinson's patients' brains that are today referred to as Lewy bodies. So now, this schoolhouse actually survived most buildings around the reservoir. It stood until the mid-1970s. I'm reasonably sure that Conshohocken historians made an effort to restore it, but it had fallen into really bad disrepair. The roof was gone, weather had gotten in. So Philadelphia Suburban Water Company at the time simply just raised it, came down, and now it's a parking lot. All right, traveling again up to Knight Road. Today, if you're traveling on the larger of the two bridges and you would have looked to your right, you would see this farm. At the time the reservoir was built, this was the Wright and Margaret Baker farm. But prior to that, it was most famously known on a prior owned pattern. His name was Asa P. Markley. And this was the Asa P. Markley Minnehaha Dairy Farm and Minnehaha Chopping Mill. So there we see the farm. The barn, the farmhouse itself, which we'll see, which was quite a structure, is peeking out here. There's the southern entrance to the covered bridge, and there's the Minnehaha Chopping Mill. And there's the house on the property. It was a 14-room mansion. And it was probably, I had an architectural historian look at this house, and he estimated that it was probably built about 1790 or 1800, which would have put it in the time when a former owner had it by the name of George Welker Jr. This property actually was part of the next property we see, which was Judge Knight's property, which was the George and Margaret Welker plantation, if all that makes sense. So my cousin's late cousin, Gail Molaski, as a little girl, was in this house, and she said she was absolutely overwhelmed by the size of this. So this is the southern southeast corner of the house. And there is the northwest side of the house. This side faced the southern entrance to the covered bridge and was just a short distance from the southern entrance to the covered bridge. When I look at this, I think to myself, what must it have been like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, to be sitting on that porch, hearing the clip-clop of horse feet and carriage wheels coming through the covered bridge and then watching them emerge from the southern entrance. A little bit of nostalgia there.
Sir,
Yes?
my mother was one of 16 children, and Asa and Millie Martin
Lillian? Yes.
took her in. I don't know when she was, I'd say, between 10 and 12, and she was a housemaid. And she recalls going to the covered bridge and out in the rain in the morning.
Interesting.
And I have a beautiful picture when we stop over of her holding the chickens. We were just wrapping the chair at the farm.
Well, we'll get to the covered bridge shortly. I realized, I think, there we go. I missed this one. There's a much better view image of the Minnehaha chopping mill. Asa P. Markley, proprietor.
Now, when you say chopping mill, what does that really mean?
Well, it differs from a grist mill. A grist mill separates the grain from the chaff. A chopping mill processes the chaff, what's left over after the grain has been removed. And what they do, they process it into bricks that farmers use to feed their cows in the wintertime. I could go back and say this. Actually, whoops. Forgive me. This was the second mill on the property. This one was built in 1900. After the first one, which was built about 1750, had burned down. Asa P. Markley and his brother Richard began to acquire this property in the late 1800s after the mill had burned. So he and his brother then built this mill. Now, the next farm we'll see was the Judge Knight farm. This originally was the George and Margaret Welker farm or plantation. It was large by most standards. The indenture is from 1749, and it was 250 acres. So that was a large plantation or farm. In 1864, Richard Markley from Norristown purchased this farm and then owned it. The Markley family owned it until 1932 when Judge Knight purchased it from the Markley estate. Judge Knight, I just want to point out, was president judge of the Court of Common Pleas in Norristown. He originally was from Ambler, Pennsylvania, purchased this property as a summer home. There's another view of Judge Knight's house. And this was tenant farmers' quarters, or as some people refer to it as, it was probably servant quarters for the Welkers. However, some historians have looked at this and thought this is probably the first home the Welkers built, given its size. Here's a view of Judge Knight's farm and barn and the tenant house. And again, you can see how the land is being cleared, the lake bottom is being prepared. The Perkiomen Creek was lined with a lot of stands of trees. And of course, they all come down. And as a kid, I remember this. I remember them putting all the tree trunks, the trees in the barn piles, and then torching them. And the piles of tree trunks would just smolder for days on end. And there's Judge Knight's farmhouse. Now, last fall, the upper Perkiomen Valley suffered a rather severe drought, and the level of the lake, the reservoir, had dropped precipitously. What happens in a lot of cases is rubble from these farmhouses that were raised and foundations are exposed. And Judge Knight's farmhouse, the rubble, this quarried stone that was used in building the house was exposed, as well as some foundations of outbuildings. All right, now we see Judge Knight's farm is gone. The Wright and Margaret Baker farm, which would have been in here, is gone, or the Asa P. Martin farm, that's gone. The photographer is standing on Knight Road or looking east across the Perkiomen Creek. And the corner of the southern entrance to the covered bridge is peeking out of the ditch right there. This is a Lamar Moonbauer image. He took it from one of the windows on the covered bridge, and it's simply, we're looking at the Markley Mill Dam, the Markley Mill Pond, and we're looking upstream on the Perkiomen. And much of the Perkiomen Creek, from Church Road all the way down to what is now the dam crest, looked like this. A lot of trees. There's a view of the Markley Mill Dam, looking across the mill pond. That's Judge Knight's home through the tree line. And that is the destruction of the Markley Mill Dam. The mill dam was built just slightly downstream of the confluence of the west branch of the Perkiomen and the main branch of the Perkiomen. Now here we see the remnants of the mill dam, Perkiomen Creek here. And again, I talked about piles of trees smoldering for days. And you can see that here. This is what we're looking at. A lot of trees taken down to the Judge Knight property are being incinerated. Another image, of course, again, of the Markley Mill Dam, the main branch of the Perkiomen. The west branch of the Perkiomen is coming in right here. In anticipation of Judge Knight losing his farmhouse in about 1955, he built another home for himself on a bluff, which is still standing and visible today. The facade has changed over time, but that's the house. And now we come to what I think is the most photographed and painted structure in the history of the Upper Perkiomen Valley. It is Markley's Covered Bridge. It was built in 1835. I'll get these buttons right now. There's another. This is the photographer has his back to Perkiomen Heights. So this is the northwestern entrance to the covered bridge. It was 301 feet long, which made it the longest covered bridge within the borders of Montgomery County. Now, there were longer covered bridges that went from like Montgomery County to Chester County, from Montclair to Phoenixville. They were longer, but this one was totally within the borders of Montgomery County. I might add, it was also the last standing bridge, covered bridge in Montgomery County.
Where's that at?
Where, well, as you're traveling Knight Road today, you'll find this interesting as we go forward. As you're traveling north on Knight Road, you cross two bridges. The larger of the two, and then the smaller of the two. This bridge stood where the larger of the two bridges stands today. And I'll show you why as we go forward. Another image of the covered bridge. I thought I overdid it with images of the covered bridge, but my son said, no, it was such an iconic structure. Keep them in. So if I'm boring you with them all, let me know. And there's another view of the covered bridge. And this brick debris you see here in the foreground, if you will, that's debris from the raising of the Minnehaha chopping mill. Another view of the covered bridge. And we see the old Knight Road here. Now what will happen in time is, and we'll see this, tons of topsoil were stripped off these surrounding hills to create the raised roadbed. And we'll see that as we go forward. Again, the photographer has his back to Perkiomen Heights. And he's standing just about where Ward Road is today. And we're looking east. Another view. The image is somewhat dark, but okay. All right, there's the covered bridge is being disassembled. And if you can make it out, work on the raised roadbed is happening here and here. Oh, as I mentioned, this is the scarring on the hillside from having all the topsoil removed. So the covered bridge is coming down. Soon we will see nothing but the piers, the stone piers that once supported the covered bridge. And here's where things get fun. Again, stone piers that supported the covered bridge. We see the raised roadbed on the east side of where this covered bridge stood, the scarring on the hillside where the topsoil was removed. Okay, again, just the stone piers and the new raised roadbed on the Perkiomen Heights side. All right, now, what the construction crew did was, when only the stone piers that once supported the covered bridge stood, they built wooden forms around those stone piers and then reinforced the void between the stone piers and wooden forms with iron, and then poured concrete into those forms. So, where I'm going with all this is, when you cross the larger of the two bridges today, way down in the bottom of the lake bed, the original stone piers from the covered bridge exist. They're down there. And I learned in time that this was a common practice when covered bridges were taken down. The masonry on those stone piers was so good that they remained intact, and this is what construction crews did. They simply encased them in concrete. So, if there's any masons here, they could appreciate what I'm saying. Then, of course, in anticipation of the future level of the reservoir, additional peerage, if I may use that term, it was added so that the new bridge, the larger of the two bridges, would sufficiently clear the level of the lake. Okay, this view, the photographer is standing on present-day Knight Road on the north side of, pardon me, of where the covered bridge stood. We're looking upstream on the Perkiomen Creek piles of trees that once lined the Perkiomen Creek are down, put on piles. If you were to stand at this location today, you would see essentially just a huge body of water. And we're looking in the direction of Red Hill and Pennsbury, is what we're doing. And there's Judge Knight's new home. And there's early stage work on the larger of the two bridges that cross the reservoir. And this, of course, is the, oops, getting ahead of myself. I have fat fingers. Bear with me. Okay. Got out of that one. This bridge, this is the smaller of the two bridges that cross the west branch of the Perkiomen. Again, we'd be looking at nothing but a big body of water today. All right, now the photographer here is standing on what had been Kutztown, or would be Knight Road today. And over the west branch of the Perkiomen, pardon me, there was a stone bridge that crossed the Perkiomen Creek. We're looking in the direction of Route 29, and we're looking at the northwest corner, if you will, of Ward Road and Knight Road. And this was the Joseph Maslaskis farm. Now, there's an interesting and sad story about the Maslaskis family. They had a son named Alphonse. And in the early years of United States involvement in World War II, he was in the Army Air Corps, serving in the South Pacific. He was a member of a bomber crew. And the plane was flying a mission in Southeast Asia and was shot down. The plane was never recovered. Crew members were never recovered. Alphonse Maslaskis was the first casualty of World War II from the Upper Perkiomen Valley. Shortly thereafter, in 1943, the Maslaskis family moved to a farm in the Valley area, and the Silcox family purchased this farm. So the Silcox family, they were the last owners. Now, from where the photographer that captured the previous image stood, if he would have spun around and did a 180 turn, he could have taken this picture. And he probably did, because both photos, the previous one and this one, are low power photos. This was the Martin Contretti farm. So traveling up Knight Road today, or prior to the reservoir, after you cross that stone bridge we saw previously, this would be the next farm you would have seen on the west side or your left. That's the front. This is the back of the Martin Contretti farm. It's a side view of the Martin Contretti farm. Here is the Stone Arch Bridge that crossed the west branch of the Perkiomen Creek. That's the Mike Contretti farm through the tree line. And this is debris from the raising of the Joseph Maslaskis farm. And this farm, of course, the Maslaskis farm, as I said, was right on the northwest corner of present-day Ward and Knight Road. And there is an image of the Mike Contretti farm. That would have been on your right as you traveled up Knight Road shortly before you got to Perkiomen Heights. And, well, we saw the Martin Contretti farm, and we see it no more. It's been razed. And the Mike Contretti farm is still standing here. Now, a raised roadbed also had to be created on either side of the smaller of the two bridges that cross the reservoir today. And there we see the destruction of the Stone Arch Bridge that crossed the west branch of the Perkiomen and the creation of the raised roadbeds. And And as I said, a lot of topsoil was stripped off the surrounding hills and fields to create that raised roadbed. Mike Katrina farmhouse. Again, there are the stone arch bridges completely gone. There's a better view of the raised roadbed. You get an appreciation of how high that new roadway had to be to clear the level of the coming reservoir.
And that home that's up there on the top of the hill.
Yeah, Katrina built
That's,
that.
they built that home.
Yeah, was it Mike Katrina that built that?
Well, first Martin, they built.
Oh,
there were
what-
two brick homes up there.
Ah.
Martin and his wife built the first one, and then Mike and Florence built.
I see, okay.
My sister married into the.
Yep. Married John. Early stage construction of the smaller of the two bridges that cross the reservoir. Okay, now we're going to travel over to the south side of Perkiomen Heights. This image is from 1875. And on the south side of Perkiomen Heights, there were two farms and a mill. This is the best I can do in terms of having an image of the area. The building here in the foreground in 1875 was the Hilligus Dairymen's Association. It was the creamery for them. I imagine by the time the reservoir was built, that building was long gone. But on the right here was the Huntsberger farm, and on the left here was the Klein farm. The Klein farm also included a mill. From the early 1800s, it was the Jacob Hilligus grist mill. Now, we don't have a good image of it, but Barbara Ball tells me she may. Yep. Okay, there's another view of Milltown. Oh, I didn't mention this. It was commonly known as Milltown. We're looking at Perkiomen Heights down here in the valley in Milltown. Okay, there's another view. The reservoir is beginning to fill up. The Huntsberger farm is gone, but some of the buildings on the Klein farm are still standing. This I thought was significant too. In 1929, a concrete road was built from Pottstown to Pennsburg. This is the old concrete highway. It's Perkiomen Heights and the old Perkiomen Heights Hotel at the top of the hill. On Route 663 or Layfield Road, if you prefer, there was also a stone arch bridge that crossed the west branch of the Perkiomen. That's an image there. It's being raised. Work is being done to create, again, a new raised roadbed. They're receiving peerage for the new road. West branch of the Perkiomen. There's the raised roadbed I was speaking of. Again, we're looking in the direction of Perkiomen Heights. Now we're going to travel over behind Upper Perkiomen High School to an area that's commonly known as the Old Road Boat Docks. Anybody familiar with that area? That was the site of the John Moyer farm. From my research, it tells me it was a circa 1850 farm. Kathy, you might be able to dispute that. The first Moyers on the property were John and Susanna Moyer. Their son, Jonathan Moyer, was next in line to have the farm, and then his son, Harold Moyer, was the next to have the farm. So my research tells me it was in the Moyer family for about 100 years when it was, when eminent domain took the farm and raised the buildings. This past fall, again, I mentioned there was a severe drought in the Upper Perkiomen Valley. Debris and foundations from the raising of this farm were clearly visible. As vast stretches of beaches were exposed because the water level had receded significantly. There's another view of the Moyer farm. Now, the Moyer farm was located on Moyer Road. It was about halfway between Markley Road and Mensch Dam Road. Moyer Road at one time connected Markley Road with Mensch Dam Road. Moyer Road still exists in part as you're coming down 3rd Street in Red Hill. When you leave the borough and enter the township, there's a dead-end road to the right that's clearly marked, Moyer Road. That's what remains of Moyer Road. Yes? Well, farms and structures are 33, 34. Yeah. I'm including like the covered bridge, stone bridges, swinging bridge, that type of thing. And there's another view of Moyer Road. We're looking in the direction of 663 or Layfield Road. That's the barn on the Moyer Road property. Again, a Lamar Bauer image.
What farm was there with Margaret's on, I live there, in Redmond.
Oh, you do, you live on Moyer Road?
I live in Jefferson, and Stonehaven, down Stonehaven, the boys are in.
Yes, okay, it is. Well, if you were able to, if Moyer Road today, as you're familiar with it, was not a dead end, and you would continue on the old Moyer Road, about halfway between Markley Road and Mensch Dam Road, you would pass this farm.
Yeah.
Did I make myself clear?
Yeah, what would our life development be? Whose house, whose farm was that?
That was the Schweig farm. Josiah Schweig owned all that property. And then in about 1968, I believe, it was Jeff Road,
Yeah.
realtor and developer bought it, and that was it. Ah, okay. I noticed, you can tell I'm local. Yeah.
Are you a realtor?
No.
Relative?
No. So anyway, that's Moyer Road and the Moyer Farm. And it goes, in the bottom right corner, that's a portion of Moyer Road, and we can see the raising of the Moyer Farm is in progress. There were two houses on the property, the main house and a tenant house. All right, this image we're looking, actually, this is Moyer Road here. Perkiomen Creek flowing downstream. This is all George Knight's property. Now we're going to move to Montgomery Avenue in Upper Hanover Township. Montgomery Avenue connects Walt Road or 11th Street in Red Hill with 663 or Layfield Road. Now, about halfway between the middle school today and Mensch Dam Road was the Martin Longacre. Say that right? Milton. Got it. I'll explain why I'm stumbling later on. But it was the Milton Gerhard farm. Does anybody remember Paul Longacre, the realtor from Valley?
Yeah.
Or Donald Longacre, his son, is Century 21, realtor from Valley? This was his grandfather's farm. It was named the King of the Valley Farm. Okay, that's the barn. And another view of the barn. Now, are you up for it? Okay. Well, just to share something with you, is anybody familiar with a book that's very popular here in the Upper Perkiomen Valley? The author is Millen Brand. It's called Local Lives. There's a poem in here it's titled The Death of Milton Longacre. It's quite touching. When I read it, it brings tears to my eyes. It will do the same to my cousin Kat if she gets through it. But I think it perfectly illustrates how emotionally attached families were to the farms that they had to give up, to the farms that they lost. Want to do it?
If I lean right here, can you hear me? Yes? This is entitled Milton Longacre's Death. Mama Longacre speaking. We moved from our, and I'm gonna cry, so bear with me. We moved from our place in September. The water company said everything around the reservoir, a certain distance back, had to be leveled. Our place had to go down. I had that 3-colored cat. Once she had had young out in the tree and brought them in. This time, she had them in the silo at the barn bridge. When they burned the silo, she went right through the flames after them. She didn't know, of course, that they'd taken them out, so she died. They burned the silo and barn to put them down. Milton never would speak about that. They put the house down. 2 years later, he was driving the truck and it went off the road below Perkiomen Heights toward Ambrose Culp's. I don't know if anybody remembers Ambrose Culp. It went to the side of the road and threw him into the ditch where there were some stones. He was hurt so. I don't know how he got up and out of there, his head bleeding and all, but he did. He walked, not far, to the old place. Nothing there by then, just a wire across the lane. But he managed to get over that and walked in and laid down there and died.
Thank you, you got through it. That's great. Yeah, okay. To continue. Thank you again, Kat. All right. Forgive me. We're now traveling back Mensch Dam Road, and about halfway between Montgomery Avenue and the old Klein Road on Mensch Dam Road was the Haven Sweat Farm. Does anybody remember Heimbach and Sweat Chevrolet? Neil Sweat, the partner in that business, as a young boy lived on this farm. His family eventually moved to King Street, Pennsylvania. And if I'm not mistaken, Pauline Schuler told me after the Sweats vacated this farm, Daniel Peterson and his family probably lived on this farm for a while. Okay, we're going to travel down across the Perkiomen Creek, almost directly across from the John Moyer farm. And we're going to look at the Oliver and Nora Klein farm and mill. The house and the barn. And this is the old Klein Road. More about that later. Klein Road at one time connected Route 663 or Layfield Road with Knight Road. Klein Road has a different name today. I'll get to that shortly. Close up in the farmhouse. And there is the Oliver and Nora Klein Mill. The mill is a circa 1800 mill built by John Hilligas, Peter's father. It says Mensch's mill, and was in fact owned by Dr. James G. Mensch from Pennsburg for quite a number of years. Hence the name Mensch Dam Road. It most famously became most famous under Mensch's ownership. That's what I'm trying to say. There's another view of the mill. It was a grist mill. The photographer's now standing probably on Moyer Road. He's looking across the Perkiomen Creek. where the Oliver and Nora Klein farm and mill once stood, and it is gone. All right, now we come to the intersection of Bench Dam Road and the old Klein Road. And what we're looking at is the Michael and Linda Fry farm. Their daughter, Nan Danielson, is here with us today. Michael and Linda Fry purchased this farm in 1947. So we see a house and a barn. There's another view of the house through the tree line. And this is the western end of a beautiful 5-arch stone bridge that crossed the Perkiomen Creek on Mensch Dam Road. So what we see here is Klein Road and Mensch Dam Road. We're looking west toward White Road. There's a side view of the Michael and Linda Fry farm. There's something about this particular image that I am really, really fond of. I think it has something to do with the fencing here in the foreground. But anyway, there's the Michael and Linda Fry farmhouse. This is the gorgeous stone bridge that crossed the Perkiomen Creek at the western end of Mensch Dam Road. Back view of the farmhouse on the Fry property. Another view of the back of the farm, the Fry farm. And we look at the barn on the Fry farm. I hope you find these images interesting. Michael and Linda Fry commissioned the old Steyer studio, which was located on Main Street in East Greenville, to have these aerial photographs taken of the Fry farm before the Fry farm was raised. So, these images are the work of Steyer Studio. I spoke with Ann Steyer, and she said her father probably got it up in the cave and took these things. Ann Ryan is her name. You would know her as Ann Ryan today. So what we have here is Mensch Dam Road, bridge over the Perkiomen Creek flowing through here, the old Klein Road here, going out to 663. St. Philip Neri Church would be located right in this area today, or is located here today. Another aerial view of the Fry farm. We see the bridge over the Perkiomen Creek, Fry Road, portion of Moyer Road. And another aerial. There's 663 or Layfield Road. Here's Klein Road, known today as Klein Road. More on that shortly. Perkiomen Creek is more the same. And that is the destruction of the Fry farm. Farmhouse is down as well as the barn. Now here's the bridge I was referring to that crossed the Perkiomen Creek at the western end of Mensch Dam Road. We're looking downstream, well, either upstream or downstream, not sure which. But anyway, this was built by Montgomery County in 1892. And the dedication stone, if you've ever driven across these old stone bridges, you will see there's large marble dedication stones that are planted in the side of the bridge, indicating who the county commissioners were, who the engineering firm was that built them, along with other information. The dedication stone for this bridge is in the archives of the library here. It's massive. And another image of that bridge. Now looking downstream. This is the Oliver Klein or the Mensch Mill dam rest right here. This is the mill pond. Another image. Just my memory takes me back. When I was a kid, before you crossed the bridge, there was a large picnic grove on the right side of this image. It was a favorite place for local civic organizations would have picnics there, firemen's association, fire company associations would have picnics there. My late Uncle Forrest Henry would take me to these things, and it was quite an experience. So anyway, there's the bridge. We see the fry farm in the background. This is a beautiful scene. It's a winter scene. It's Bench Dam Road. We're looking at the Montgomery Avenue side, if you will, of the bridge over the Perkiomen Creek. The fry farm is in the background. And this image was taken from the bridge over the Perkiomen Creek on Bench Dam Road, and it's simply a view of the Perkiomen Creek between, well, the fry farm. Prior to the fries owning the farm, it was the Milton Gerhardt farm, but of the Perkiomen Creek, and much, if not most, of the Perkiomen Creek flowing through the upper Perkiomen Valley looked like this. Tree lines, a lot of trees along the creek. Another image of the bridge. Yet another image of the bridge. This is the Mensch Dam Road, end of Moyer Road. We see Mensch Dam Road, the bridge, and the fry farm is in the background. And all the standing trees that, for the most part, at least on this side of the Perkiomen Creek, have been cleared. Here's Fry Farm, Fry Road, Klein Road, and the bridge over the Perkiomen Creek. Again, I thought I included too many images of this particular bridge. Again, Chris said, no, keep them. It was quite structural. So, again, I apologize if I'm boring anybody. And it's Bench Dam Road, the bridge over the Perkiomen Creek, and the fry farm is being raised.
So that bridge is gone.
That bridge is gone. Yep. Okay, there's now the fry farm is completely gone. The bridge is still standing, and that's Bench Dam Road. I'll share a funny story with you. Okay, we're now going to go out to 663 Layfield Road, and as you're traveling out of Pennsburg on Route 663, when you begin to travel on the raised road bed, just before you would cross the bridge that takes you across the reservoir, to your left, you would have seen the Queen of the Valley Farm. This was in the Hilligus family for many, many years. In fact, the founder, publisher, and editor of the Town and Country, Charles Q. Hilligus, was born on this farm. His father was a doctor, John G. Hilligus. And it was John G. Hilligus, the doctor, that gave this farm the name, the Queen of the Valley Farm. Just to share a personal family story with you, my great-grandfather, Thomas Dahmen Heinrich, and his family were tenant farmers. They were tenant farmers on quite a few farms here in the upper Perkiomen Valley. In 1898, there were tenant farmers on the Queen of the Valley Farm. My great-grandfather died of typhoid fever on this farm in 1898. and it was Dr. John G. Hilligus who diagnosed him as having died from typhoid fever.
Weren't there two houses on that property?
There was the main house and the tenant house. You're correct. Here's another view. The photographer is standing with his back to Perkiomen Heights. This is 663. This is the Queen of the Valley Farm here. This is the Dorsey property. This is the entrance to present-day Kleinard Road. Now, who knows the story about Kleinard Road? Who wants to tell it? Me? Okay. Well, the name of the road should actually be Klein Road. I referred to Klein Road earlier in the presentation. Klein Road at one time, 663 or Layfield Road, with Knight Road. When the information was submitted to the sign maker inadvertently or mistakenly connected the abbreviation for road, RD, to the name Klein. So it became Kleinard Road. Oops. Yes, ma'am.
Really burns up Tina Boardman because that was her grandfather.
Yep. And rightly so, it should. I mean, why in the world the township didn't, no comment. Why they didn't have it corrected? No comment. Anyway, so, of course, the Dorsey property is gone, the house is gone, Queenland Valley Farm is gone. Pay attention to this image. This image it's a Donald Muller image actually, was taken in 1955. Now we move to 1958. He's essentially Donald Mull standing at the same vantage point, capturing this image. There's the new 663. The Dorsey house is still standing, and you can see the lake is filling up. Yes, Barbara?
We got married March 1955.
Uh-huh.
We went to Florida and we were going for 2 weeks. When we came home, it was a nightmare. When we looked at in the morning, everything was gone. But we left, it was beautiful. 2 weeks later, it's gone.
Yeah, a lot of beauty was lost. There's no question.
So the
about
Dorsey house didn't get taken by the water company?
that. Oh, yes, it did.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, I should point out, some of the structures, like Schwank's one-room schoolhouse, stayed standing for years. The Dorsey house actually survived for some additional years, but eventually was taken down. It is on Aqua property today, formerly Philadelphia Suburban Water Company property. Yeah, but it's only speculation on my part. The house itself was never in danger of being impacted by water. So they could take their time, I think, in taking it down, which is probably what happened. Yes?
I'm just wondering, what was the reasoning behind, I mean, the Philadelphia Suburban Water Company just decided to do this, or, I mean, it seems
Well-
to me so much history was lost, that must have been so
What-
tragic for people to see.
All right, the background story is simply this. Following World War II, the Philadelphia suburbs began to grow rapidly, especially in Delaware County. So, with that growth came the need for water. So Philadelphia Suburban Water Company was incorporated. It was formed by venture capitalists from Delaware County. And their goal was to secure a reliable source of water which could be supplied to future customers in Delaware County. But they needed what they wanted to do was to build an impound dam, which is what the reservoir is. So they chose the spot that they did on the Perkiomen Creek, just north of the borough of Green Lane. But what made it possible was they petitioned the state legislature to be granted the power of eminent domain, which meant any property that's going to be impacted by the coming reservoir could be condemned and taken. And the rest is history, as they say.
Did you get any furniture?
Yes. Property owners were paid what was considered at the time fair market value. But it took a lot of property owners years to actually receive the money, because they had to be off their properties by 1955. In fact, I have some documentation. Some families on Knight Road, the Sowiches and the Molaskis, received their eviction notices on Christmas Day of 1955. You noticed it. So,
So by the time they got the money, it was worth a whole lot.
I'm sorry?
By the time they received their money, it was worth a lot.
Probably. Probably. Okay, so that's anyway, Dorset property, Lakes going up. Okay, now directly across Layfield Road from the Dorset property was the Steyer Farm. This is now gone as well. Again, the photographer has his back to Brookfield Heights. Now we're going to transition over to Church Road. Church Road connects Kutztown Road with New Conshohocken Church. As you leave Kutztown Road, you'll go down a long hill, go into a small valley, then you go over a small rise before you get to Molasses Creek. And on that rise was the Henry Miller Farm. Now, there's an interesting story about the Henry Miller Farm. The original owner, with an indenture dating back to like 8 to 1750, the original owner of this property was a gentleman by the name of Jacob Maurer. And when the barn on this property was raised, a beam in that barn was found to have carved into it, Jacob Maurer, 1736. I've been asked what happened to the beam. I have no idea. And I've asked nobody knows. It should be here in the library, this section of it. In the spring of the year, if you're traveling Church Road and you drive over this rise, in the rubble that you can see from where the farmhouse once stood, and it is visible, you will see plantings that the Millers planted. Narcissus will pop up, daffodils, tulips. Now we're traveling toward New Conshohocken Church. The next farm you would have seen on the corner of Hawk and Church Road was the Dillman Hallman Farm. I visited with members of the Hallman family, and the only image they had to share with me was an image of the barn and the chicken coop. They had no image of the farmhouse itself. So you take what you can get. And then finally, and this will conclude the presentation. Are you familiar with the bird viewing area on Church Road? It's now pulled off the large parking area. That was the site of the John Henman Farm. And that's the John Henman Farm that we're looking at. So that sort of concludes the presentation. Whoops. I do have an opera, because there's one other thing I would just want to point out. I thought it was interesting. If you're patient with me, we'll get there. Let me get back to the grass.
Hi, Mac.
Okay. Sorry for the delay. When I saw this 1942 aerial image, what impressed agriculture to the Upper Perkiomen Valley in 1942. When I was in high school, we were in the Bucksmont Athletic League, and other schools in the league referred to us as the Farmers. And looking at this image, I think we truly were. So anyway, that concludes the presentation.